Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the PivotBoss pre-market video for Tuesday, November 12th, 2019. I am Frank Ochoa, aka PivotBoss. Here's a look at the daily time frame of the ES. You'll notice that price continues to trade within this very narrow range at these highs. That's the second day running that we have a narrow calculation here for the 6-day average. And again, this is 7 days now running sideways above the previous month's high and at all-time highs. Additionally, one thing that we want to continue to watch is how bullish this trend has become. This trend is very, very bullish, and there's only a couple of ways this thing goes. We either see another strong 2 days up, and then we see another kind of hold pattern here just above 3,100, or we see some sort of failed high at 3,100 that leads to a big meltdown back down toward 3,050. So, you know, again, this market has been very quietly going sideways, and then it burst higher, then sideways and burst higher. We could have another big burst coming, but this move, again, could be a pretty decent move based off of the averages we're seeing here. At least 75 handles over the next 5 to 6 days, 4 to 6 days, and it could be faster than that. Now, one thing to keep in mind is, again, if price did break down here, we've been in such a bullish uptrend, would there be a rejection around 30.50? Because 30.50 rejection in that zone would suggest a bounce opportunity and a continuation higher still. Failure to hold 30.50, that would suggest more downside and perhaps could open up quite a return, maybe back all the way toward 29.10. That's the 200-day average. All right, let's take a look here at the NQ. Very similar price action, narrow 6-day range, signal 2 days in a row, 7 days running now. We can make this a 7-day range if we wanted to, but again, this trend remains very bullish. Even if it were to break down, do we get a rejection and a continuation? If this thing can stay above 8,100, that could suggest much more strength ahead. This market really hasn't lost any luster here. But one thing to keep an eye on is if price does push up, do we see a significant rejection, especially near 8,300? Something that would look like, you know, an outside day here or an outside day there. What type of behavior? Because these are small days here. It wouldn't take much for a bearish outside day to develop, and that gives you confidence on where you might be headed on the downside after rejecting the upside. So again, that's going to be something to continue to watch as we move forward, because again, once you get past 5, 6, 7, 8 days in a narrow range here, it gets pretty close to the time where expansion inevitably occurs. All right, let's take a look now at crude oil. You'll see here crude oil continues to hold within a narrow range. This narrow range has developed right at the 57s. 57 is very important right now. You can see right here, this is where it went offered. After it was trying to hold here, it went offered. It stayed below it here, stayed below it there, and now it has chopped precisely around that level. There's almost a perfect triangle type of pattern here in the lower time frame as well. If you go to, say, a 60-minute chart, you'll see this type of behavior and that behavior. We had an inside day yesterday. We have an inside day again today. A very clear compression. One thing that I mentioned to our traders in the trading room is that this behavior right here reminds me very much of what nat gas looked like just a few months ago before it exploded higher. So it had this pretty strong rejection. It held the mid. It had an outside day here, held the mid, eventually walked its way higher. It got to about this point here and then had a huge breakout day which triggered a continuation thereafter. So again, that's something that could occur again here. This is a very clear range that has built up some range. This too is compressed on a 6-day range basis, and so a $4.20 move, 420, could be seen out of this range once we see a definitive breakout or a failure to break out. Again, if this thing were to break down and reject, we could use that pivot low and project higher 4 points, and that would take us to the likely upside target. If this thing breaks to the upside, again, we could see what happens here. A failure to hold, I would say 55s, again, that would trigger perhaps a move back toward 51s. But right now, this thing coiling up as well and could be due a breakout fairly soon. All right, let's take a look now at gold futures lastly here. Now gold has given up some of its support here. It hasn't been able to really break back below a major pivot LVN in a long time, ever since we got a breakout right down here. That was an outside day that led to tremendous strength. We saw a big time move here, but once you got the breakout, it never came back to test that level. It formed a higher low here. It pushed through that LVN at 1375, never came back to test it. And then it pushed through 1460 right here. It never came back to test it, hit a pivot low at 65, and this is the first time we're testing deep into an LVN since we started that breakout right here back in June or end of May. That led to a huge push here, and now we're testing the zone. Still a major LVN here, still have a rising 200, another LVN down here, 1375, 1380, and we're holding below the previous month's low. One thing to keep in mind with this one is also that we are seeing a very clear kind of flag pattern develop here, and perhaps we can still see a little bit lower prices into 1440.3, which is the FOMC key level. It's a naked FOMC key level, and we still haven't tested it. So perhaps the price needs to drop down to this lower edge so that it can bounce back up toward 1500. That could be the next move right now. Again, this is in a very iffy zone, so continuing to watch it here. But the fact that it hasn't really just dropped very hard yet suggests that there could be a fade event coming, but still need a little bit more time to develop. All right, that is it for now. We'll see how this plays out the rest of the session. Good luck, trade well, and I'll see you in the trading room. Take care.